Hello, humans. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another episode of BFFR. Lately, I have been noticing that people like to identify themselves with different political movements. However, when you look at their actions and the way that they live, they are not so in tune with this specific ideology. The following guide or following discourse that I'm going to have actually kind of applies to every and anybody who is too comfortable with the system to question it very thoroughly. For a reminder, we are currently experiencing capitalism to its full force. It's so full force that we are entering a recession. And a recession is just another way that wealthy people, aka the 1%, can make even more profit by still exploiting and now even more killing people who are poor or who are considered less than by the system. So capitalism is oppressive to most, racism is oppressive to some, colonization and mean fragmentation is oppressive to all. First, I would like to define what is white domination, also referred to as white supremacy. White supremacy is a set of colonial systems and identities that seek to suppress and belittle the integrity and humanity of an other, and in order to exploit their resource. For example, you have different systems that kind of like come from this very oppression. You have toxic patriarchy, exophysic religions, which I talked about, who are actually Abrahamic religions. I also call them colonial religions sometimes, modern science and modern economy based on stolen capital, anti-blackness, etc. With that come various attributes, some refer to as privilege. And honestly, this privilege is really just sociopathy, aka the loss of humanity, which then enables mechanisms of said white privileges, like the privileges to never or rarely be held accountable. Who is that other? Because white people by definition are seen as a norm by those very oppressive systems. Because they're seen as a norm, they are not considered as other. It's the people who are not in this norm that are other. So who is that other? Anybody related to blackness, actually. Anybody that is black adjacent or that simply doesn't have white European phenotypical attributes. I'm not saying that all of these people have the same experience. That is not true. It comes with intensity. You have to consider it as a spectrum. However, because they present traits that can be correlated with blackness, they would then face oppression. And blackness doesn't only have to do with just the color of your skin and just your face. It also has to do with prior morality and just norms that were applied in ancient African and indigenous societies. It's a sad thing to call them today ancient, but it's almost been 500 years. And before that, we were even colonized by the Arab world. So this is why things like moral minorities and coons aim to self-erasure, basically to erase their culture in order to access the same privilege as white people.
I don't think it was until my late teens or my early 20s that I started to really unpack my role to white supremacy and the systems in this country, and really understand that a lot of the internalized issues that I was dealing with were coming from that foundation of my proximity to whiteness and the roles that I was playing to white supremacy. You know, I've always felt othered. I've always felt different. And I've always had this almost instinctual, reflexive desire to need to fit in with white people around me. I remember at a young age, there would be times where I would go up to my white friends and ask them, hey, do you like see me as white or Asian? You know, and it would be a reward. It would be something I celebrated if they said, oh no, I just see you as white, you know? And so it's really interesting to reflect on all of those ways that I was so desperately trying to be a part of the white community.
There's also white colorism, texturism, featureism prevails in all communities as a means to self-erase and in order to conform to whiteness. I would like to talk now about the role of Black women in all this. There are two ways to read and understand the place and the role Black women occupy in this system. First, you have the fact that just like scapegoats in a narcissistic family system or just in any narcissistic environment, Black women are here for the narcs to regulate their emotions by projecting their self-hatred, guilt, and shame onto them.
Two ants are so rude.
You need to get me off the camera and I need to step away from this
These two ants are so rude. They peasants. They saying they manager on the way. I don't want to talk to the manager. Y'all ants. Your manager peasant. Y'all ants. I give y'all bum ass hold $15,000 a piece and quit your job.
Willing.
I'm giving you bums one more chance. Look at, get their hair. Sink in on the hair. They hair nappy as a motherfucker. They look like Africans. They done got deported over. What's
deported and escorted.
Do you bums need tokens or what? Bigger than the law. Also.
After all, the best way to colonize people is to ridicule their culture and to ridicule the person who carries that culture. So, Black women. I would also like to pose right now to say that I'm very active on TikTok. So if you have time, just please go and check out my TikTok and listen to it. And you will see that I actually make alternative points. I actually get a little bit more deeper in the content that I'm making on this YouTube channel. I make more thorough videos on TikTok where I discuss details rather than the whole thing. The second role that Black women have is just like Jesus. Black women have taken on the role to be the bigger humans. We can see it in respectability politics and in the way they idolize Black men who have now become their first threats. An example that I have and still really breaks my heart to this day is Toyin. Toyin was a queer femme who lived in America. And she was at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter protest when the whole George Floyd thing happened. And unfortunately, she lost her life to the hands of a Black man. There are many, many channels on this platform that focus on the specific type of violences that Black men have Black women endure. That being said, I am not the person who will want to wear that role. I am not the person who wants to wear that cape. I am not the person who is acting for Black men and their survival. I am really just acting for the well-being of the community. And the community comes with Black men, of course. And I hope that they do learn, but this is not my main focus. I just want Black women first and foremost to heal and really to place herself in the world accordingly to that healing process, and so that they can have stronger boundaries, so that they can build better communities, more healthy, without having to focus solely on the fact that they have to preserve the race or save it from this threat that we call white domination. I burned my cape a while ago, and I have now endorsed the role of a local and physical online menace. I love to troll on people. I love to comment. I love to reply to men who I think are not people who are helping us move forward or who are not actively helping this mission that I give to myself. And so many women have taken on themselves that is to save Black women and to save them from themselves and save them from the system that has now treated them so bad that it's become a norm for us to just erase ourselves in the context and just get rid of our own emotions and think of ourselves last. And that should not be the case. If we want to survive, if we want to remain here and keep creating the wonders and beauties that we create, we have to remain healthy. That's really important to me. The thing that motivated this video was that something actually happened to me a few weeks ago. I was going out with people. Here in France, racism is very different. It's expressed in a very recovered way. And the reason why I'm saying that is that usually white women, they will not come and scream at you. They will not come and be complete bigots at you. However, they will put you in this role where they expect you to endure quietly while they just bathe in their own emotional turmoil. They will have this habit of treating Black women like the help. So what I do usually when I have white people entering my space and people who want to befriend me, I question them very thoroughly on how they view race and how they kind of place themselves in all of this, so that I'm sure that I am facing someone that either one doing the work of self-deconstruction and holding themselves accountable for the things that they do, who doesn't fear to be confrontational because they understand that it has to be done in order to solve the ambient problem that for sure doesn't really hurt them first, but does hurt them in the long term, because it hurts their humanity. How did your relationship with confrontation evolve, and how do you see it impacted your relationship with your family and your friends, and for example?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I was conditioned growing up to be very quiet and very passive about any racism that I personally experienced, and then any racism that I witnessed. The older I got, I feel like there was more inner turmoil where the more passive I was about what I was experiencing and what I was witnessing, the angrier that I got. And so it got to a point where I feel like instead of like directly communicating what I was feeling and the criticisms that I had of other people and how they were treating other people or how they were being abusive or racist, would come out in like bursts of anger that weren't necessarily constructive and would just be perceived as, oh, she's just being dramatic or she's being aggressive. It hasn't been until my 20s where I have been able to actually very clearly and concisely state what the issues are and what needs to be corrected. I'll give an example. There was a time where I worked in a corporate office for a major health insurance company in the States. And I remember I had a Black coworker at the time who came running into the break room and was complaining and venting about one of our white coworkers who had made some sort of racist reference to a movie character in depicting this Black coworker. And I remember that she was very upset and distraught about it. And before that time, I would probably just sit back and be quiet about it and just like let it happen, keep my head down so that I could get through work, right? But at this point in my life, when I was finding my voice, I, in that instance, then stepped up or stepped in and I was like, okay, what can we do to keep you safe? What would you like us to do? Do you feel comfortable going to human resources and telling them about this encounter? Do you want someone else to do it for you? Do you want me to go and talk to them?
That, or I'm just facing someone who's very comfortable in this situation and still has no empathy and sympathy towards people who look like me. She might see me as an exception because this time I'm very articulate and I went to some schools, etc. But people like this will perceive Black people as just a mean to an end, a tool, not even somebody, but something that they can exploit, a foreign thing. During that night, I was sitting down and her colleague tried to talk to me. So when we were having those discussions, I told her about my life. It wasn't in detail that I did that. It's just that, I was just like telling her about different stuff that I met, that I kind of encountered since I've been living in the city. She literally was like, oh my God, I could not. If I were in your shoes, I would be so bitter. I'll be so angry. All of this.
Yeah. Hey.
She was literally having a monologue because at the moment she said that, I stopped really participating in the discussion, because to me, it was once again another white woman trying to seem like she is virtuous, but really just being immature, insensitive, and really just sociopathic. After this whole ordeal happened, I remember that I told my friend, the friend that I came with first, what happened, and she asked me, why is it that every time you meet a white person, you have to get that deep? And I let her know that the reason why I'm going that deep is just to make sure that I am in a safe space. If I'm not in a safe space, I'd rather have to know it right now from the get-go, because I cannot afford personally to bathe in the illusion that people around me are safe, even though they're not. Because guess what? If I do that, I am putting myself in danger, active danger. And I tried it, for example, last year, and I ended up assaulted. So, hello? I'm just not doing that anymore. I will not taunt you with labels, but understand this. Like I've said many times before in my videos, if you cannot apply your ideologies and rhetorics to your daily lives and habits, you might as well not identify with them. They hold no values. And you intellectualizing very tangible situations is not helping. I don't like to discuss rhetorics and theories. I like to discuss lived experiences.
I was talking to my coworker about not talking about quote unquote politics at work. And they were asking me a bunch of personal questions. And so I was kind of telling them about my life, and we were going back and forth. And then it got uncomfortable. But it's interesting to me that to paper demons, anything like that has to do with our rights or our capacity to survive or our capability to thrive in this world is politics. Like something you discuss at the dinner table with your family to piss them off, and then it ends there. Politics for some of us isn't like a conversation piece. It's not to prove to other people that we're smart or that we are well read or we watch the news. Politics to us is not like something to piss our parents off. It's our life.
I feel like when people are like doing this and just be like, oh, you know, I'm deconstructing myself, I'm a liberal, or even though liberals are not the best, but I am like putting in the work, I'm pro-Black and all those things. If you say that, you better be about it. And if I question you and I say that you're not about it, you're just like wasting my time trying to sound and seem cautious and wary of others, but it's not the case. I feel like for that, you should let me give you the title of performer because that's who you are. How would you identify yourself politically, or if you were to use like a more scholar terminology, which word would you use to describe your journey into self-discovery and self-deconstruction again?
Wow, that is a great question. It's hard too, because I feel like, especially like US liberalism, when I think of that term and that label, I automatically think about what we're talking about, and performative allyship, as opposed to actually putting in the work, right? Because I feel like here it's very much, as you stated about Black Lives Matter, right? Like, especially when people were posting in solidarity by posting the black squares on their Instagram pages.
My God.
Yeah, I know. And I know we use it a lot as an example, but it is a very tangible example of where it's something quick that people can do to say, hey, like, I don't identify with the oppressor. I'm not racist. I'm not that person. And then kind of move on from that. And, you know, when we say the very like juvenile cliche of like actions speak louder than words, I think that a lot of liberals in the US are quick to do a lot of talk and then not follow it up with that action. So I've kind of been deconstructing like what political party I even identify with, but something that I've discovered and that I feel like I've received a lot of education on and from a fellow TikTok creator. Her name is Dallas. I think her handle is still Freedom Farmer on TikTok, but she identifies as an abolitionist. Okay. And this is something that intrigues me because I feel like every time I have a conversation discussing deconstructing the systems in this country, it really returns back to the idea of abolishing all of these systems, reforming all of these structures that have oppressed a lot of marginalized groups in this country for so long. So, you know, I don't necessarily identify as a liberal anymore because of what it has become in this country.
Back when I was living in Paris, I was hanging out with people who worked in show business, people who identify with activism, people who really now today are big influencers. Most of the time, they're not about what they talk. They don't do that. They are very much tokens for brands and they accept that title. However, I really do not like when they endorse and identify with ideologies that have been built for a specific purpose, because then they are fragmenting once again consciousness and really not helping the cause. So in this video, you often hear me talk about fragmentation, like fragmented meme, fragmented consciousness, and all those things. I'm just taking a little bit of time to let you know what it is. So I think in 2020, I published an article on mimetic warfare and colonization. And that article is a French article. I already talked about it in the past, and I have it translated on my website. You can find it in the description. You can find the link in the description box. And basically what I have said is that Western powers usually use concepts in order to colonize people, because concepts, aka memes, are a great way to colonize people without even them noticing. How they do it? They use a term that I fabricated, and that is fragmented memes. And what those fragmented memes are, they are words from which the definition has been changed. So they're going to slide very smoothly in people's vocabulary, but with time, the meaning would change. And because the meaning is going to have a colonial bias, now people's consciousness will be forged around that colonial bias. And that is how you do mimetic warfare, basically. I have a series that I started last year called Definitions, where I discuss fragmented memes. The first meme that I decided to talk about was humans. I have 2 chapters out. The third and final part of the chapter of on humanhood is going to be out this year. It took me a very long time to metabolize and research. It took me about a year, 6 months to a year to really research. And so I still need time to basically summarize it and put it into video form. So I do encourage that you watch it if you haven't already, or check it out after you're done with this video, because I think it would actually help you understand what level of trauma we are experiencing as a race and a species. Because of that, colonizing powers have placed very concrete concepts out of their context in order to confuse the mass and pass on laws and customs without too much resistance. Politics is one of those concepts, those fragmented memes that I talk about, because it went from being a culture emanating from shared values by a community or people to a centralized institution occupied by money and power-hungry demons. It's not the same. Everything, when people often say, yeah, my body is political, everything is political, because usually politics just means how you regulate and organize the life of the community. It works hand in hand with religion, and that is why they have fragmented it also, to the point where now you have to dissociate politics from religions, from science. And that is a colonial work that has been done, and it has been successful, because to this day, most people who have been colonized still think of those different parts of what a society really is as institution, physical places that are out of their power, out of their will, out of their vision, out of their consciousness. Thus, they lend that power to a bunch of people for sure, but a minority still. Those people are now literal representative of said laws and customs, which led majority of the people to not feel concerned by politics, to even reject it as if they weren't impacted by it. Now they now believe that they exist in vacuums. We are now living in a world where ignorance and unconcerning are the very shackles that keeps us in chains. That being said, the opposite can also be true. Intellectualizing politics and laws to the point where you lose touch with its actual impact on the people concerned, and your responsibility in this makes you really as useless in the fight against oppressive systems as the type of people that I described earlier. That is also why my goal with this channel is to vulgarize very complex concepts in appearance, so that majority of people can reclaim that power, regain that consciousness, regain that discernment, and actually be able to act and place actions in time that can be fruitful for people who want to work against this oppressive system. Because I really think that keeping the mastering and understanding of those concepts to an elite is what really takes away people's power.
I realized when I was very young that the reason why Africa and Africans are where they are now is because they literally have had their history like stolen and taken away from even their school programs. And so many people in Cameroon don't even know how come we have independence, because the school will not teach you that. People who actually know about these things, they know that because they still have an ancestor that was present at the time that they were born to tell them what happened. For example, my father, since I was a child, always told me about the trauma of that independence war, and how when he was like, just like in school, like in primary school, he would see like cadavers, decapitated body, like so many horrible things. So since I know that cultural revolution has to come, and cultural revolution start with the youth and education. I think that I identify with the term abolitionist, but here in France we use more Pan-Africanism as a term, because there's this notion of like global consciousness and how we have to get on board with the same goal in mind in order to succeed, and not just like do little like bursts of like stuff, you know. We have to be able to mobilize each other and just build like an alternative culture. And yeah,
being a radical menace does not mean that you have to debate everybody's motives. Understand that some people are your enemies, point blank, period. And there is no need to debate with them, because they do not plan on evolving or changing. They just plan on playing the game until they die. And that's often the case with men. That's often the case with white people. That's often the case with bigots. At one point, you just have to understand that people have made their choice, and wanting to fight against them is really just showing that you are triggered, because now that you're seeing people who express that very old version of you, you are now feeling triggered, and you feel like you have to make them change because you feel like you had that power onto yourself. That is not the main focus. The focus is just you should just sit down, reflect, and choose your battles. If you're someone who pretends or who identifies truly with anti-oppressive actions and ideologies, but really doesn't really do the work, you are more of a threat to me, because then if I trust you too much, I will allow you into spaces where you inertly will be a menace, and you will be a threat, and you will be an active, destructive force of the oppressive system into my community and my environment, which I do not want. I believe that having strong boundaries and a strong identity filled with lived experience and metabolized information, and not being afraid to take up space, can be a game changer. This can also lead you to attract people with common interests as you, and build valuable alliances with them.
Holding conversations like this is how we learn about other people's experiences and learn about perspectives different from our own, you know. And I know, as an Asian American who grew up in a white culture, that I will never have the same experiences as you, or experience the same type of oppression that you've experienced, you know. So the only way for me to really be able to equip myself with the education and knowledge to help protect other people from that oppression and that racism is to listen to you and hear your stories, you know.
In a culture that is built on passive aggressiveness and non-confrontation, a culture that requires us, especially Black women, to tone their discomfort down for the sake of the system, confronted even at the risk of losing your entourage, is the bravest things one can do. And that is why I decided to interview I Love You, a TikToker that I actually started following last year, because I saw that she made the work to deconstruct her internalized racism. She made a video where she basically confronted another person who was also Asian American. And I thought that was very interesting, because oftentimes when I have been close to people who were white adjacent, or just who were closer to whiteness than me, they were trying and attempting to deconstruct the internalized racism. Oftentimes they have more difficulty really confronting people from their own community, because I think it came with a feeling of guilt and shame.
I at times still get defensive because here's the thing. I think that we attach racism to a moral code. And so if someone tells us, oh, you're being racist, there's some sort of trigger where we automatically feel as if our moral code is being questioned, and we make it this very black versus white, like good versus bad thing, right? And so, you know, I've had to learn how to step back and reflect on my own inherent racism that I was raised with and around. And it is not easy, and it's emotionally draining, but it's more emotionally draining to the victims that I'm inflicting harm on by not doing that self-reflection, right? And see, this is my issue too, as I go off on these little tangents. But essentially, you know, since that realization, since I sort of had those epiphanies about myself, my proximity to whiteness, and my role in this model minority myth, it's been an ongoing phase of reflection and further education, and being in community with and making space for marginalized voices. Specifically, I feel like a lot of my advocacy, a lot of my content centers around Black oppression. And, you know, I'm still, to this day, there's still things that I am reflecting on and correcting. So
I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed the subject. I'm very happy for this opportunity that I had to talk to Isla and interview her on her situation and her journey. I truly recommend you to also follow her on TikTok, as well as the other creators that I mentioned in the video. I will also link Isla's GoFundMe in the description box below. If you would like to support this channel, if you like to support my content, please also consider subscribing to my Patreon. I put a lot of things down there. I have a lot of series. You're also able, for some tiers, to decide on the subjects that I will be discussing in the Garden series, where I actually make more thorough research. I am preparing a new series that will be on astrophysics, quantum physics, and spirituality. There's actually a spin-off to a series that I'm already making on Patreon, and the title will be Causal Connection. So if you would like to check that, if you feel curious about that, please check out my Patreon. I also installed a 7-day trial to my tier so that you can see what the Patreon is about, how often do I post, and what I do in general. Also, please like and share the video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if you would like to participate in the discussion. And yeah, goodbye.